Hey, Thomas.
Hey, Jen.
What are you listening to this week? Welcome to season 5 of What Are You Listening To? The weekly podcast created to foster community through music by sharing the stories behind the songs that soundtrack our lives. Some of the songs are old, some are new, all good. I'm Jenn Tully, and this week I'm joined by Thomas Rheingans. Thomas is a classically trained pianist, composer, author, educator, and the visionary creator of the Piano Zen method, a groundbreaking approach that merges Eastern mindfulness practices with Western piano techniques to offer a deeply immersive and meditative way of learning music. Get ready for a fascinating conversation as Thomas and I discuss the intersection between music, mindfulness, and the transformative power of slowing down to learn faster. As always, Thomas and I are going to get to know each other via 4 songs. This week, 3 are his picks and 1 is mine. And in a What Are You Listening To First, Thomas is going to play part of my song pick on the piano while we're discussing it. Which songs do you think we're going to discuss? Tune into our conversation to find out. And in case our song picks are new to you, we'll publish a playlist with the episode so you don't miss a beat. So, with that, let's jump in. Thomas, what are you listening to this week?
Well, I'm a big fan of George Gershwin. He's one of my favorite composers. And I couldn't make a selection without including Rhapsody in Blue by George Gershwin.
Yes, this is such a classic song, and I'm so glad that you brought it. It's a favorite of mine. And I was reading also, and I wonder if you've heard this or if you can validate it or not. It's internet lore currently. So we'll see if you can help me with this one. I read that the clarinet beginning to this is the second most recognizable intro to a piece of music right after Beethoven's fifth. Isn't that crazy? Do you think that could be right?
I might agree with you on that. I did a little. I was just kind of curious, and that
Okay.
opening clarinet glissando, um, it's this, like you said, defining feature of of song, and I guess it was improvised by a clarinetist. His name was Ross Gorman. He was just
Okay.
doing it, and during the rehearsal, and Gershwin heard him messing around doing this weird glissando, and he loved it so much, he said, "Keep that in." So it was really the clarinetist that was just messing around,
Wow.
which happens many times in rehearsals. You'll hear something, and so yes, that famous clarinet, that's by Ross Gorman.
It's so beautiful, and it's something that just I feel like sets the tone for this song, and then you just get carried away after that, it sort of, like, gives you permission to, like, dial in and just relax into this song, and then the song just takes you on a journey. I think that that's what I've always loved about it, and this was a song that I can remember from, music class when I was in school, and then, of course, it kind of got a new life 1999, 2000, when it had that amazing feature in Fantasia 2000, where they put the animation with it that I thought was just so perfect and beautiful. And so I love that this song, I actually learned this too when preparing for the show, that this song is actually 100 years old. It was written in 1924. So that's crazy to me that this is a 100-year-old song and still
Mhm.
sounds as fresh and amazing as it does.
Yeah, and I think in the first performance, there were a lot of classical composers that were there because they were in that early part of the century. They wanted to listen to what was music on the street, if you will, and
Okay.
jazz was establishing itself in America, and so I think Rachmaninoff was in the audience and some other luminaries in the compositional world. They were just curious. They wanted to take in, and Ravel. Uh, there's some works by him that seem to be inspired even a little bit by Gershwin's compositional style. And
Well,
yeah, go
and
ahead.
I was going to ask you, like, how, like, Gershwin was popular in this day. I mean, he was a popular musician. I mean, not necessarily like the Taylor Swift of his day, but I mean, people knew Gershwin, right? They were fans. He had a following. Is that right? Am I like understanding the timeline correct?
Well, what's interesting about him is that he loved musical theater, popular music, but he also was so skilled and loved classical music, probably from some of the teachers that he studied with. So he had a foot in both worlds of popular, but
Okay.
also sort of serious classical music, but of course infused with jazz elements. And that's what made him so unique and made it so, I guess, American style to a lot of people outside of the United States because they'd never heard jazz included in a concerto, a piano rhapsody like this. So, yeah, he's unique in that way, but he was also very successful. And I think there's an anecdote that he went to study with Ravel, Maurice Ravel,
Okay.
a famous impressionistic composer,
Yes.
and I think Ravel had said, asked him, "Well, what did you make last year in composing?" And after he told him, he said, "Well, I think why would you want to be a second-rate Ravel when you can be a first-rate Gershwin?" And I think he just didn't want to try to change Gershwin's style. But yes, he was successful as a composer, and I think it was because that he probably had the liberty from writing hit Broadway shows and
Yeah.
hit songs that he could dabble in larger classical forms.
Yeah, I also read there was so much like lore around this song and especially the debut performance of it. But I loved this story and was curious to ask you about your thoughts on this. So, it was this piece was actually commissioned by band leader Paul Whiteman and written by Gershwin. But it's sort of the story goes that Whitman's orchestra performed the Rhapsody with 23 musicians in the ensemble and George Gershwin on piano. And apparently, this was pretty, typical of Gershwin, but he chose to partially improvise his piano solo. And so the story goes that the orchestra sort of anxiously awaited for him to nod, which signaled the end of his solo and the cue for the ensemble to resume playing. And so he did not really write the solo piano section until after the concert. And so nobody even really knows exactly how that original Rhapsody sounded at the premiere because he didn't put pen to paper on it in its entirety until after that initial performance. That's kind of crazy to me.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at that story. That's an interesting one. I totally would believe it because of his nature. He would go to parties, and he was known for they'd suggest him to play some probably popular songs or his own songs, and he would improvise on them. And everybody loved what he was doing at the piano, but he probably played them differently every time. And somebody did approach him, and they said, "Can you write them down? Write something down. Write one version down so that we can publish them." And so there is a collection of Gershwin songs in his sort of improvised style, and he varies it quite a bit. It's really in a innovative and at that time, but probably he would never play it the same way twice. And so that's a cool story because I could totally see him doing that in a live performance.
Well, and so typical for me of jazz musicians as I think of modern jazz. I think we spoke of this when you and I initially had a conversation that I went to the University of North Texas, which has a very world renowned jazz program. And so that was always a complaint that you'd go see like the 1 o'clock lab band and you'd hear this amazing music, but then you'd never get to hear it again because so much of it was improvised. So I'm wondering, as a musician yourself, how much do you rely on improvisation? Is that something that you value and really encourage and practice in your own work? Or are you really like, nope, the music is there, it needs to be played note for note? There's a meaning to that, or do you kind of ride the fine line? Do you have a personal policy about improvisation?
I think it's the type of genre that you're in. If you're playing a Mozart sonata, I mean, some people do dabble with it, and some there are some jazz musicians that have taken some of these pieces and improvised on them. So it is very interesting and inventive, but it's under the premise of improvisation. In the classical stage, you know, changing the original score is sort of a faux pas unless there's some performative art element that's involved.
Okay.
So, but it is fun to experiment with improvisation in different styles, and I do like to take sometimes popular or jazz charts, things that allow for a lot more inventive exploration, and so. almost any style is up for grabs. I think when I'm performing, there's always a improvisatory element. So it would be hard unless I really work out an arrangement beforehand. It's always going to be different.
Yeah.
So that's the nature of most musicians that are reading charts that have chord symbols, and it's just some are very inventive, and jazz is so diverse in its styles that I wouldn't be surprised that somebody has taken Bach or Mozart and improvised. And actually, I should say there are some skilled musicians that you can say take Star Wars, and they'll say improvise it as like Beethoven or Mozart. And I can't
Oh,
think of the man's name, but he would do that. You would hear the theme and then he would play it like
wow.
Mozart. So yes, there are some classical improvisers out there that can do that. They're amazing.
Yeah, that sounds like an incredible skill that you just have to have like such an encyclopedic knowledge of, everybody's work to be able to do something like that. And before we move on from this song, I also do because it's going to come up more in the show. I not being a classically trained musician, needed to look up what a rhapsody actually was. And so just for listeners out there that don't know, a rhapsody is a type of musical composition that is free flowing, expressive, and often features a range of emotions and contrasting moods. So once I understood that, it really helped me sort of look at the rest of the songs that we have on the playlist and sort of how we go through. We're going to come back to Rhapsody very literally in your third pick, but I also have more questions about that as we go on. I think that, it seems like this Gershwin song is really like truly a textbook version that defines what a rhapsody is. It has so much hard and soft in it, the tinkling of the piano juxtaposed with those giant horns and the bang of the cymbals that you get like almost immediately after that beautiful clarinet intro. And so I do love the idea of sort of exploring this idea that it's free flowing, expressive, and features a range of emotions and contrasting moods. So we're going to put a pin in the definition of rhapsody. And I think we're going to be coming back to that as we travel through this playlist. So
Okay.
definitely let's move on to track number two. What was your second pick this week?
Well, it comes from an album by Billy Joel called Piano Man, but it isn't the Piano Man song most people are familiar with. It's the Ballad of Billy the Kid off his
Yes.
1973 album.
Such a good one. I love this album. I talk about Billy Joel often on the show, and The Stranger is definitely my favorite Billy Joel album, but this is canon for sure. I mean, you can't be a Billy Joel fan without loving this album as well, whether it's, for the song Piano Man, for Captain Jack, which is another favorite of mine, or for this song. And I've always loved this song in particular because it does have so many different styles in it, right? Like you get that sort of like bum ba dee da, when you first start that old clip clop westerny sound, and then the harmonica comes in, and then kind of, I'm sure this is not a technical term, Thomas, but that sort of like saloon piano intro, that makes me feel like I'm in an old timey saloon. Um,
Yes.
and then it gets like quickly like rock musical genre and then like straight into a Billy Joel ballad.
Hmm.
So I love that you get like all of these different things in this song, and it kind of makes me harken back to that definition of rhapsody a little bit.
Hmm.
Right? Am I way out of line in thinking that?
No, I think he's talked about it as pop meets western, blending storytelling traditions with a symphonic style orchestration. And it does, I'm sure he was thinking of a western film score, and he took a character, and I've heard him in an interview at one point saying, well, I had some artistic liberties with the actual story of Billy the Kid because he probably
Right.
wanted to serve his own storytelling needs. And but that's not uncommon in western lore, that there's certain stories that just are not based on that's truth. They're
Right.
fictionalized. So I think one of the aspects of that is, now see, he hadn't put together his band yet, so he had a band, a core band that's probably even some of the members might still be with him, but he brought in studio musicians. And so I think he had a much larger palette. So he didn't have his rock band, pop rock band that was there, the nucleus. He was, I'm going to do this Western thing. Well, he would bring in probably, people that could play these certain instruments, the violin in the certain Western style. And he's got someone's playing, banjo. So I enjoyed it because it had a cinematic quality. And that starts to um, lead into some of the when I stepped back a little bit, I said, "Oh, yes, there's a common thread." Well, I think for me that you're seeing the Rhapsody, which is not actually inaccurate. I saw this
Okay.
fusion of musical styles, classical with
Yes.
jazz, Western with pop. And I started, I was like, oh, I'll share this with Jen because I didn't see it at first, but I said, well, why are you drawn to all of these selections? And I like the hybrid nature of it. And I love his other music, but this is so out of the norm in some ways for him.
Yeah,
And
it is.
he's got strings, he's got brass, and he still has his classic little Billy Joel piano riffs in there. So,
Yeah. Is he an artist that inspired you to play the piano, or were you already like pretty like into your piano path career idea that that's what you wanted to pursue when you first heard Billy Joel? I was curious about that as well. Was he an artist that inspired you to play the piano?
no, the interesting aspect of him, and the reason I included one of his songs was I grew up, my brothers were significantly older. And so they had the Doors, Jefferson Airplane, they had Rolling Stones, Beatles, and I listened to all that music. And growing up, but I almost saw my dad's playing Rhapsody in Blue, he's playing classical, he's playing big band music. So
Yeah.
I'm absorbing all of this variation in musical styles and these genres. And but Billy Joel was an artist I selected personally. Like actually, it came from I was a girl in a jazz band, and she kept calling me Piano Man. And I said, "Why do you keep calling me Piano Man?" She says, "What, you don't know that song?" And so she handed me the album, and so I took it home and started listening. What was all this Piano Man? And I that was the first album I got, and so it was kind of, how you stake your own claim. Even though I
Yeah.
loved all the music, I loved all that the music that I was immersed in. He was the first artist that I selected and was drawn to, and so that's why he's also on this list.
I love that, and we talk a lot about that on this show, that the time or sort of that dividing line or that first album that you purchased for yourself that wasn't
Hmm.
influenced by what mom and dad are listening to or siblings. Like, I think that's such a formative moment for people that love music, that first thing that was yours that you got into.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, and it's not, I don't think it's an accident that he was a pianist, right? And then here you are so deeply immersed in piano. I was going to ask you one other question too. Like this is this one again, it's all up for personal interpretation. And as you mentioned, Billy Joel has been asked many times, is this song like a metaphorical retelling of your story? Is it truly about, Billy the Kid, the outlaw, blah, blah, blah? And he said different things. I mean, he definitely acknowledges that he would just wanted to take a stab at sort of this impressionist type of lyric writing, like that I've read as well. And then he talked about how, that last verse, he sort of
Hmm.
changes from singing about Billy the Kid and singing just about Billy from Oyster Bay in Long Island, which is
Right.
actually where Joel is from. And so people sort of started thinking like, oh, this last part is sort of him like tying it up with a bow and making it about himself, which he has said, well, actually, it was about this bartender that I knew in Long Island. Like the lore goes from there. But one thing that I always thought, like when I listened to the song, I always thought that the ending was sort of him bringing the imagery full circle to sort of represent himself. And what made me think that was the lyric where he says, well, he never traveled heavy. Yes, he always rode alone. and he soon put many older guns to shame. And I thought, well, at the time, like Billy Joel was coming up as like the young whippersnapper. Of course, you had like, Elton John out in the world prior to this. You had other like pop piano players, but it made me sort of think like, oh, this is sort of him saying like, you guys look out. Cause this was I believe this Piano Man was his second studio album. I think it was just his second. So he was still a pretty new guy on the scene. So I always thought from the very first time I heard this, I'm like, oh, that's sort of him like firing his warning shot. Like, look out because I'm about to explode this scene and you're going to have to move over and make room for me.
I actually thought about it as well, listening to lyrics over the years. And he does have a tongue-in-cheek, though, comment where he says a six-pack in his
Yeah.
hand. And I thought, yeah, yes, he's like a little rebel. He's still pretty young at this time. So of course, I just thought it's like kind of a humorous take on instead of the six gun, he's got a six pack. but,
Yeah.
yeah, I think he was having some fun with imagining himself as a bit of a rebel that's hitting the scene because of his age. I'm sure. Yeah. In
Yeah.
73, he's pretty young. So.
He was a young guy. Yeah.
Mm.
All right. Well, then let's take it to track number 3. This is going to be such a fun one to talk about. So tell me what your third pick was this week.
Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen.
Oh man, I mean, we can't have a Rhapsody conversation without this song, can we? It would be
Right.
impossible. We'd be remiss.
Right.
Well, this song was released in 1975, and I have such a hard time believing that it's an almost 50-year-old song because
Mm.
it's still like any party you put it on, any car you turn it on in. I've even seen people in the grocery store have their moment with this song. Like it's
Mhm.
just sounds as good now as it did whenever I heard it the very first time in the 70s. Like it's such a unique, and talk about like blending styles and pulling all different kinds of things together. This song really like takes a piece of everything. And so tell me a little bit about why this pick this week.
Well, the Queen was, as I was, establishing kind of a pop artist, I connected with Billy Joel first. And of course, you're hearing a lot of rock bands. And that was the rock band that I was drawn to. So there was another reason it was there. You got your pop, rock band, and of course jazz composer Gershwin.
Mhm.
And so yes, I bought a lot of the Queen albums and just enjoyed it. But it was my rock band. It wasn't Jefferson Airplane. All those were great. Beatles are great and all that. But and yeah, the idea that they had so much fun they would do, and I guess people have trouble categorizing it because it's blending rock, opera, and ballad, and Rhapsody. This style into
Yep.
the sort of rock genre, and they had so much fun with those multi tracks that they did. So many multi-track vocals to create sort of a chorus operatic
Yep.
chorus. And that probably of course comes from Freddie Mercury and his interest in opera. And I think this is a when I was looking a little bit deeper into it, I thought this would be a fun tie-in. He was working on it in the late '60s, and he referred to it as the cowboy song. And why
Oh.
was because of the line where it starts, "Mama just killed a man." He thought it sounded so
Oh
Western.
yeah.
I mean, just
Yeah.
he started come up with that line and just it's my cowboy song. He's killed a man and he's on the run. I don't know, but so
Yeah.
I didn't see that coming, that little connection, but it's interesting. But and I also
Yeah.
read something about leading this when they were recording it to over 180 vocal overdubs. It's
Yeah.
that's hard to wrap my head around, but yeah, they were exploring that maybe in a way that no other band had at the time. But it was all to create a operatic type chorus, singing and commenting on the action that was taking place by the soloist. So
And I think people forget, with modern technology where you can literally like record and mix an album in GarageBand on your laptop these days, like this is no small feat to put this kind of an album together. Like you said, 180 like vocal overdubs, like there has to be. I mean, and I can remember reading something too when they were recording, like anytime Freddie Mercury added another Galileo like in that part, like they had to add more tape because they had to, it has that echo effect every
Right.
time he says Galileo. And so, I mean, it just must have been an engineering feat to make this album like come off the way that it did. And I love too, I'd never, when we were talking, you were saying earlier, like the song messers so many things, it's hard to categorize. I think it was when I was looking in just like a Wikipedia article about the song. They kind of broke it down into like 6 movements. So
Hmm.
they sort of approached it as like you have this intro, which is this 5-part a cappella harmony. Then you go into the ballad, which is the piano and bass guitar kick in. Then you get this guitar solo by the amazing Brian May, obviously. Then this opera part with the crazy lyrics. And in my opinion, the funniest part of the Wayne's World bit. We'll get to the second life of this song.
Hmm.
Then you go into like the hard rock piece where the song fully explodes. And then the outro, which kind of returns you to the place that it started. And then it finishes beautifully with that final, almost whispered line, any way the wind blows. And then you sort of get that gong like fading out and letting you just leave this song peacefully. I just think it's so perfect. You can tell that you're dealing with artistic geniuses when you listen to this song, right?
Hmm.
Anybody doubts that Brian May is a genius, like, and he's, Mensa certified genius, legit. But if you doubt it, listen to this song. And I think that there's just no way to deny that this band were some of the smartest, most intelligent, most skilled at their craft musicians working really in any decade, not just their own. And I think that the song just illustrates all of that beautifully.
Yeah, the when you were picking up on the Rhapsody theme, um, when you were describing that, if you changed it to Gershwin's movements, very similar, and classical composers, Brahms, and you know, um, probably Schumann, they use the term rhapsody because many times they found themselves moving from an idea to an idea, and they didn't necessarily always link them together, but they were changing scenes almost. And I suppose opera would be one of those examples where when you have a scene change, all of a sudden the music changes. So Gershwin had probably so many melodies in his head that he was going from one idea to the next, and he with linking, but without trying to call it what we would say sometimes a symphony. A symphony has certain structural tendencies that when you say Rhapsody, it says, well, we're going to do it a little bit more. It's a little bit more improvised in some ways, a little bit more free form, and yeah, Bohemian Rhapsody fits into that category. And there's a precedent for it with classical music, so they're definitely drawing on their knowledge of that particular genre. But it's the one to catch all without, we would call sometimes the Beethoven heavy developmental approach,
Okay.
where we think of his symphonies, he's going to work on an idea and really get deep into it. The Rhapsody is a little bit more playful, and it can move, and it's not beholden to some small motivic idea. And so
Yeah.
and some composers were more like that. Tchaikovsky, he just heard all these melodies and he just wanted to put them down, I think, on paper, and without sometimes that Beethoven's sort of sense of development, which is kind of a rigorous taking of small items and, you know, digging really deep into it.
Well, and it feels so serious a lot of the
Mhm.
time as well, and I think that that's what's great about a song like this is that absolutely every single member of Queen were serious musicians and they were able to come out with something like this that is so rich, that is so different, that ended up again getting that second life in something so silly as Wayne's World. Everybody knows that classic scene in the car where they like bust into the headbanging, halfway through. And I think that Queen would have loved that. I think Freddie Mercury would have been so there for that, like I
Mhm.
think that he would have thought like, "Yes, that's exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to take this thing that feels really hard or really highbrow like opera and I wanted to make it accessible. I wanted to make it rock."
Mhm.
And I just love that because it feels like mission accomplished, like
Mhm.
if that was the assignment, he understood it. And like the band just kind of jumped in and did it with him. And I think that it's so cool and unique. And I still can't think of another song that sounds like Bohemian Rhapsody, right? Like 50 years later, I cannot tell you, like, oh, yeah, well, this song's kind of like Bohemian Rhapsody. No, nothing sounds like it. Nothing before and nothing since.
You're right. I know sometimes I think of the large rock works like Stairway to Heaven. There's
Yeah.
some, but Stairway to Heaven kind of it seems to just kind of keep building and building. But I don't know. But yeah, I
And
would.
not a lot of humor in Stairway, like, I gotta believe, like,
No,
"Scaramouche, Scaramouche, will you do the fandango?" Like, some of that part feels like they're trying to be a
exactly.
little bit humorous,
Yeah.
whereas, don't get me wrong, like, anybody that's even listened to the show once knows I love Led Zeppelin, but that it's like it feels like it's very serious when you're listening to Stairway, whereas it feels like they're giving you a license to just have a good time with Bohemian Rhapsody, have some fun.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Well, I think with that, speaking of having some fun, let's do something really fun. And I would love to introduce my first pick this week and then actually like kind of talk to you about your thinking and your methodology around piano zen, but just to give listeners an idea, as I was thinking about speaking with Thomas and thinking about piano music, I love classical guitar, I love gypsy jazz, and I love piano music. So when I'm listening to instrumental music, those are kind of the three places that I go. And this song is one that has been with me since I was about 6 years old. And it is the theme from the movie Somewhere in Time by Roger Williams. So this was a 1980 film. John Barry was the composer, went on to compose lots of music scores and things like that. But this was a Christopher Reeve movie right after he did Superman. So he was kind of at the height of his career. Jane Seymour also is the female lead. And I can remember my mom loved this movie. And anytime I heard the music from this, I would just come running into the room because I was so captivated by it. So I don't know, Thomas, would you be willing to play a little bit of this song live for us here?
Sure. Let's see if this works.
All
Uh,
right, let's try. Oh my gosh, what a treat for me to hear that song live. I'm thank you so much, Thomas. That just made my whole year, honestly.
oh, wow.
It's such a special song and it's such a special song for my mother and I. I lost my mother back in 2018 and so that moment meant so much to me. Thank you for indulging me in that song.
Oh, well, I'm glad that actually it worked out, and I was hoping I could connect the piano to our podcast, and it seems like it worked out.
Perfect. Well, tell me about I'm really fascinated by sort of this whole brain integration concept that you have as it relates to learning to play the piano. Can you tell me what you mean by that and sort of how you developed the piano Zen method and why you felt like it was important? I think I just asked you about four questions in one, but yeah, let's just start with like breaking it down. Why did you feel like piano Zen was something that could be beneficial to those trying to learn to play the piano?
Well, it started because I was actually releasing 3 CDs at, the same time back in the early 2000s, and, I just wasn't able to really practice the way had done when I was younger, and it was really necessity, the mother of invention, 'cause I the way that a lot of musicians practice, and the reason they sometimes spend hours at their instrument is often that they're drilling. They're playing sections over and over again to master the technical challenges, and it does produce results. But it also comes with a lot of tension and sometimes frustration. And I couldn't muster the energy to drill these sections over and over. So I just started, well, I thought about something that I did before concerts to calm my nerves, and I would sit at the piano. That's the only time I would do it if I was anxious, because there's a lot of performances. You're getting all the professors are listening to you, or you're in a competition, and I would sit at the piano and I would play through my songs, but very slowly and very much with a light touch. I don't know why I just tried to calm my nerves, and sometimes it worked, but it was just a sort of strange thing. That's the only time I did it. And so fast forward quite a few years, I said, well, why don't you just try that? Just try to play through these songs, practice that way. Don't just, as a, setup for performance. And anyway, I saw just amazing results. I took a Beethoven piece, the Appassionata last movement, and
Yeah.
I dedicated myself for about 4 or 5 days. I would just play it through with this Tai Chi type of approach. And the results really astounded me. And probably was because I think, they talk about different brain waves, and it's possible that, we normally, I think we're in what they call a beta wave. Our normal
Hmm.
analytical, critical thinking is a beta wave. And when you slow things down, you get into what they'll call an alpha wave, which sometimes in yoga, Tai Chi, maybe light meditation, or maybe even with my technique with piano zen, you get into a different type of brain function, and it's starting to expand. And even below that, in really slow tempos and deep meditation, is a theta wave. So I didn't realize it at the time, but that's what I think was happening. I was in this sort of Tai Chi piano practicing mode, and in that, there's a lot of mind and body balance. And normally for musicians, just because of our tendencies, we bring a lot of tension, we bring a lot of our, I would say, tension, sort of physical, mental, and emotional, where there's a contraction. And that contraction is also integrated into the practicing. So it's, if you're talking about trying to open up a channel for your music to express your innermost, feelings, if there's tension in your body, it's very difficult for it to emerge. And so I I was reflecting on the results, and I would say it was the closest I'd had to, if, for lack of a better way of describing it, a sort of an out of body experience at the piano. It
Okay.
just went very deep into, I wasn't worried about my technique. I just was sort of floating above my fingers. And then I started to ask in a very general way, like, Beethoven, what are you trying to express? Just kind of, and normally I can't ask those questions because I'm so busy, with my fingers, but my fingers were just executing all the technical passages without really any trouble. Whatever I felt, my fingers would, just like a sports car, would just handle the road just amazingly. And so I took, after that happened, I started to try to use this for my own practicing. But then a few years later, I said, I would like to share this with beginners so that they right away can start to imagine themselves at the piano, but in a way that's sort of mindful, mind and body balanced. And that's became piano zen. And many years later, it's taken a while, but that's kind of the genesis of where this piano zen method came from.
Well, it makes so much sense to me because it does seem like when you're expressing so in such a creative way via, such a playing the piano. I almost can't think of a more creative endeavor, especially because you're trying to connotate emotion without words, and you're doing it, on a set of like keys that don't change across a piano. And
Mhm.
so it seems like, yeah, you'd want to tap into every single piece of creative energy that you had in order to make that emotional connection with the audience. And oftentimes, too, I think of, hearing piano music as being such an intimate experience. I don't know if it's because we associate that with, being an instrument that folks gather around, to sing, whether it's Christmas
Mhm.
carols or, you're in a small, perhaps like a chamber music setting. And so it's a small group of people listening. So I do believe that piano music for me feels so intimate. And so, yes, having that very creative connection so that you can connotate those emotions through to the audience seems really natural. But I also understand, and I've seen, I took piano lessons as a kid too, and it was not mindful. It was bang, 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 bang over and over again on the same chords until you had them completely. It was just rote, and so
Right.
I love the idea of sort of opening that up and almost allowing yourself to get into a bit of a flow state with it. And it seems like that's when everybody performs at their optimum level, right? Whenever you're just sinking into it and you're breathing through it and you're flowing with it. And it sounds like this method really allows folks to do that. And I love that you focused it on beginners, because then this always functions as kind of your true north, right? You don't have that baggage of the banging drill. You have this baggage of not even baggage. You have this like very lovely rolling suitcase that allows you to go wherever you want, in a very mindful, deliberate, creative way.
I think, yes, there's always in every type of activity, sports or music or dance, there are exceptional talents that are always, we measure ourselves to them. And but they're like the Gershwins of the world and the Queen of the world. They're this
Yeah.
amazing artists, and we don't want to measure ourselves to them. I think a lot of people, just like some people like to garden, some people like to fish. There's something about that I think allows them to be in a slightly meditative state that they don't allow themselves in any other type of capacity in their lives sometimes. And you need to find that. And for some people that want to take the piano in more of a inward journey, that is kind of what I was trying to give them permission. And most of it is based on slowing their mind, relaxing the
Mhm.
mind, slowing it down, and then the body will follow. And in that state, actually, I think we are actually more productive. But our kind of either our Western mind or our contemporary society doesn't think we're getting anything done because we're practicing slowly. And there's a
Right.
lot of no pain, no gain. It makes its way sometimes, unfortunately, even into the music world, that hey, you need to drill that 100 times. And for a lot of people, I just want to enjoy music. And I think they can experience the journey of music in a way that's more um, is more I would just say more meditative and reflects inward. And for some people like yourself that maybe you didn't have a great experience, sometimes it's not the student, it's what method are they using with you. And so you might have not have had permission. And I will say that with my own students, I've been watching and using these techniques on them. It's very difficult for them. They'll play just as an example, say they're playing a little Bach piece or some pop piece, and I know they're playing it too fast and they're so tense and they're just everything's contracted, and I'll say, okay, let's slow it down, can you really slow it down? And they'll nod their head and they'll play at almost the exact same speed. So you're like, this is not easy. It is not easy to slow people down. This is why I think, though, Tai Chi classes, yoga classes, or maybe even a meditation class, you have a person leading the class, so they
Right.
control the tempo. And what I did with my program, my online lesson program, was I took a fictional character from the accompanying novel. I play a character in the lessons, but they're always there every step of the way. They're like, okay, take a breath, relax, and we're going to go really slowly, and they count that through. And I think once there's a leader, class teacher like that directing, you let go. If
Yep.
left up to your own devices, you're going to return to this sort of beta wave, kind of tense, expectation, linear driven. And I think that if you took it as a journey, like if you're going to learn the entertainer, and that actually is in my program. There, actually, I teach people to play the entertainer, a beginner version of it. But you could, if you say the goal is to learn the entertainer, you could take a direct line, and I'd say that's kind of more of a Western approach. Direct line. I'm going to learn this song, and I'll do whatever it takes. And a more Eastern idea is sort of circular journey up the mountain. So one is kind of going circular up to the top, and the other one's going straight up, which is not going to be easy sometimes, right? Because there's no path. You're lots of rugged terrain and rocks, and so Piano Zen is combining Western sort of tradition of teaching with Eastern inspired journey of self discovery and inward, you know, reflection. And I find when I practice this way, it's so relaxing. And I know that I'm getting actually a lot done because I've seen the results. It's hard to get that across to my students, but I think it's worthwhile pursuing that. You don't have to do everything like it's you're on the 100-meter race or something. That it's okay to go slowly.
Yeah, I
You have to
love
have
this.
permission.
I love this, and I love your sort of, visualization about, like, going straight to the top or, like, circling around the mountain. Like, both are gonna get you to the same place, but one, it's about the journey, whether it, like you said, a journey of self-discovery or a journey that learning you're more productive when you do slow down, or you're more, capable whenever you're being mindful about what it is you're choosing to do. So I
Hmm.
just am so grateful, Thomas. Thank you for playing live for us. Thank you for sharing what you're listening to this week. I love your approach, and it was just so interesting chatting with you. So I'm so grateful for your time. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Jen. I was really fun to talk with you and get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, it's been a great week for classical music and learning about rhapsodies. Well, listeners, if you would like to learn more about Thomas, his work, and the Piano Zen method, you can visit his website at www.pianozen.com. That's Pianozen. And as always, please be sure to follow, download, and share this show. And if you love listening, drop a review on Apple or Spotify for us. Last but not least, to stay informed on all things Super Awesome Mix and what are you listening to, be sure to follow us on Instagram at Super Awesome Mix. Thanks for listening, and please join me again next week to find your new favorite song.